to be done in love like
Hey guys, we're Kristen and Jarrell Abraham.
Welcome back to our channel.
Welcome back. Thank you for tuning in. So this week we want to talk about...
Well, this is another chapter in our marriage series, but
Correct.
today we're going to talk about culture and in-laws.
Okay. So I felt that this was definitely an important topic because when you are marrying your person, you are also marrying into their family. So in order to have a happy, healthy relationship with your spouse, you should have a happy, healthy relationship with their family. One of the reasons being is that they are your main support system. So they're going to be the ones that you can go to and you can discuss certain situations about your relationship to help strengthen your relationship with your mate. The other reason, and like the biggie, is because you want to learn more about your spouse.
Right.
You have to know where they've come from so that you can understand them better, because they're going to do things differently than you do. And sometimes when you don't understand why they do certain things, it can be either a culture shock or like a make or break in a relationship. And it could be like the smallest thing in the world. But because it's so different to you and the relationship, really it's more of you melding. That's the word, welding?
I think it's melding.
Meshing. We'll go with mesh. I know that's the one.
Well, yeah, that has a lot to do with two separate entities coexisting, coinciding, and working together cooperatively.
Right.
So if you say mesh, it makes more sense.
It's really you two meshing your cultures together so that when it's time, and we're going to talk about family planning in the next episode, but when you guys get to that point, then you know, okay, this is how we want to raise our children. These are the things that we want in life together. So it's just important so that you guys can be on the same page with your goals.
Exactly.
So then we have honor thy mother and father, which you can find in
Exodus chapter 20, verse 12.
Yes. So honor thy mother and father.
And your days may be long.
And your days may be long.
Now, it's not a guarantee, but you have a better chance.
Yes.
If you honor them.
So one of the things that we did before we got married is we, tried to talk to our families as much as possible about each other. And, my husband called my dad because he lives out of state. Well, my parents, they live out of state. So, he called up my dad and, told him what he was planning. And then when they came up to visit, he proposed. So basically he asked for my hands in marriage. And, I did speak to my parents about it, and so we wanted to make sure that we tried to do everything that we could to make sure that it was an easy transition.
You're leaving out an important part too, but go ahead and finish because I wanted to add to what you were saying.
Okay. So we wanted to make sure that it was an easy transition, which it kind of was, but then it kind of wasn't, because there's always that like when you're starting a new job,
it's a shock factor.
There's always like little things that like get messed up, little kinks and quirks. And then of course, like I said, my parents live out of state, so it was kind of like us trying to coordinate everything, and them getting to know more about him was a little more delayed than possibly it would have been if they lived like right down the street, because then we would have had more time to really commune with each other. But at the end of the day, the reason why I bring up that example is because honor thy mother and father. If my parents would have been like, you know what, no, I'm absolutely 100% not with it, then I would have had to reevaluate some things. And the same thing with his family. If his parents would have been like, no, you know, son, I don't have a good feeling about this girl. You know?
Maybe she's not, I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think she's the one.
We're going to talk about this because, you know, no, but it's a valid point.
Yeah, and there's definitely a lot of risk factor, especially when your parents are supportive for you.
Well,
when they're the supportive type of people.
There's a pattern of support that's always been there, and then suddenly there's something there where they're like, oh, I'm not sure I can get behind this. It's gonna make you reevaluate either way.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, but to not have that support is definitely a shock factor. Yeah. And then it also puts strain on the relationship because then it's kind of like holidays. What do you do on holidays? You know?
They're coming! What do you
do on holidays when you have children? What do you do with, you know, like, there's just so many things that, like, go into it. And then, like, even with us, I think after we got married, we learned more about, like, how marriage is a culture and really how to deal with your in-laws.
Absolutely.
After the fact.
You're so good.
But no, because we all of a sudden there were like a whole bunch of sermons on it that we started like seeing online, and it was like, wow, this would have been definitely nice to know.
Listen, the Holy Spirit started giving us a whole workshop after the ceremony, but it was definitely a blessing. And
Absolutely.
It was really informative, and it helped us grow because we needed that, you know, going into that next chapter and already being married. And it's kind of like, okay, where do we go from here? How do we move forward? It was great information, you know, but there was one thing I wanted to piggyback. It's not even a but I'm saying but. It's not a but, and there was something else I wanted to add as positive reinforcement to what you were saying. So not only did I ask her father for his blessing, shout out to Pop, Mom, they're in Florida, but you know they're like avid viewers of our.
I know.
You know, I love that, but I'm gonna send a link to my parents too, so they can get on there. My parents are just getting into YouTube, so you know they're late bloomers. Don't be hard on them, everyone. Please, you know, send love to my parents. They'll jump on eventually, but her parents are definitely, you know, they're with the internet wave, so they're keeping their, you know, their antennas up, and they're always testing the waters to see what's out there and make sure that they're you know, kept up to date to what's going on. But I'm saying a lot of butt. Shut up. So to piggyback to hubby back on what she was saying, as far as, you know, speaking to the parents, I did ask her father for his blessing to, you know, ask for her hand in marriage. You know, some may consider that to be old school, old fashioned, whatever you want to call it. It's the respectable and the honorable way to do it. And you know, she spoke to my parents. The most important part of that exchange was that they sat down and met with each other. That was the part I wanted to add. So her parents sat and met with my parents. Now, if they weren't able to get along, that would have been like a huge red flag, and we would have had to sit down and say, hey, what happened? You know what I'm saying? But not only were they able to get along and have a mutual connection with each other, they had mutual friends of the family. They had mutual people that they knew, and it was like, oh, that's my man, or oh, I know him, or I know her. So that was great to see that, because you know, we don't always want to hear that. You know, I remember back in my day, or I was doing that since before you was born, or I knew them before you was born. You know, it's always us like, okay, predated. But to see two different households of a similar time frame of generation have those similarities and be able to remember things and recall things that we weren't there for, it was like, oh, that's beautiful. You know what I mean? That's a beautiful thing, and it was enjoyable, not even just pleasant. It was enjoyable. So, you know, they enjoyed each other's company, and they definitely, you know, as soon as her parents left, my parents were like, you know, they're really nice people. Her parents are really sweet. You know, my dad being the, they're nice. Yeah, but they liked her parents, you know, and her parents liked my parents. So that was really important for them to see that and to feel that way. And you know, that was what I wanted to add. So when you are preparing for marriage, it may not seem like it's that important, but once they interact, once they interact and they're with each other, around each other, you're gonna see how important it's like. It's either gonna be like, wow, they really like each other, or wow, they really don't like each other. I didn't see this coming.
Well, but then look at all, like I had mentioned before, like when there's important events, right?
Mm-hmm.
So not only the holidays, not only just having children, but when the wedding itself is an important day.
Right.
So if your family's not getting along prior to the wedding, that might be a hot mess of a wedding.
Right.
Then, you know, as your children are getting older, then you have like games. They might be involved in sports. They might be involved in school plays and things like that. So it's like the worst thing that you want to do is invite, you know, the two sides of your family, and then they come, and then it's like they don't get along.
Okay.
And then it just adds stress on your personal relationship, because regardless of who is the aggregator in the sense, you know,
never matters.
Whether it's her family, his family. So I think it's just much easier to like really get over any types of conflict once you all have that initial mutual understanding.
Right.
That, you know, nobody means any type of harm. There are no ill feelings. Everything was spoken about, you know, prior to.
Right.
So, I mean, the in this era, everybody's like, oh, chivalry is dead, but it's not, and it shouldn't be.
Right.
And that shouldn't be something that we're excited about or we're happy about. It's like, no, that's not it. You know, be kind to one another.
Absolutely.
Be kind to your spouse's family.
Absolutely.
You know, like
should definitely be a priority.
You want them to actually like you.
Yeah.
You know?
And keep this in mind, guys. You're not always going to have a pleasant time, you know, in those particular situations or circumstances. But the objective should always be that you're attempting to do so.
Right.
So if there is a peaceable option, which there always will be, that should be the goal. That should be the main thing on your mind, trying to get to, like, if I could do this, then that'll keep things peaceful. Or if I can, you know what I mean, behave or operate this way, or say or not say these things, that will help the situation.
Right.
So
that's why I equated it to like starting a new job, because it's like when you first start that job, there's so many things that can go wrong,
right,
and there's so many things that do go wrong,
yeah,
and then it's like, how do you recover from that, you know? So there's just like certain groundwork that if you do prior to, you know, like when you go for a job and you have like a good resume, you know, it's a sterling resume, you have great references, this and that. So it's kind of like that, you know, if your families meet prior to, or you speak to you know, her family or his family, you know, you're really building at least some type of relationship, some type of rapport.
And be open. Be open. Don't be shy about, you know, talking about them or helping your spouse to get to know them a little better. You know what I mean? There are certain things you're gonna have to explain. You know.
Absolutely.
So definitely be an open book about that and be communicative.
Yep.
So I'm gonna move along with the notes. Did we do cleave to your spouse yet?
I don't think so. But we did this one.
Okay, so the second point is cleave to your spouse. That's based off the scripture of Genesis chapter 2 verse 24.
Okay, so the reason why that's coming up again, because we did touch on it, I think, in Newlyweds,
right?
Is because
two become one.
The two become one, and what happens is the man leaves his father and his mother and cleaves with his wife. So even though, yes, we're talking about all of this with you know, your families should get along, and you know, you definitely want to explain to your spouse as much of the culture that you grew up in, your spouse is your spouse.
Right.
So there's certain things within your family household that do have to come first,
Right.
because you're going to create this new family with them.
Right.
So it's, again, the meshing of cultures. So now you two have to mesh your cultures, and then you have to assimilate your extended relatives, because unfortunately that's what they become now. They're kind of like extended relatives.
Yeah.
Assimilate, and everything kind of like meshes together.
Right.
And I think that is actually one of the things that our parents did very well, was they understood and they respected like our time and us really like as newlyweds coming together and figuring out how we wanted to make our marriage work. And then of course we have a blended family, so how we want to raise our kids and
Absolutely.
things like that.
And they were really supportive in that area when we needed advice from both sides, because there were times where we had like slight dilemmas, and it was like, I don't know if we're putting ourselves in harm's way or in jeopardy making this decision to go above and beyond or overextend our reach just to keep peace, right in certain situations with people, places, and things. So we would talk to them, and they would give us advice based on life experience and say, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm officially telling you that you probably should not do that. And we knew it was real when both sides said the exact same thing.
Exactly the same thing, without even talking to each other.
They didn't talk to each other, and neither one of them knew like the whole situation. But the interesting about that, and the reason I say it was not because they're so different, but because they asked different questions.
Yeah.
Her parents asked different questions, and my parents asked different questions about one particular situation. And we answered the questions, and they said, no, it's not a good idea. So we didn't do it. But that's kind of what I mean by they were there as support, and that was really great, because if it wasn't based off of what their life experience was, it wouldn't have been valuable advice to us. But that also that also leads me to excuse me, that also leads me to another point that I want to give you guys, that it's like a jewel that'll definitely help you too. What worked for her in-laws didn't work for us a lot of different times in a lot of different situations, and that was also a lot of the advice that they gave too, was like, make sure you're doing what works for you and finding your own way. The same thing with my in-laws. A lot of the things that worked for them, it didn't work for us. And because us being our own people, like being ourselves, having our own identity, we had to find what worked for us in our marriage and in our relationship, and approach things from a way where it was like, okay, we know that this is how we can move forward. It's the appropriate way to do it. We're not compromising ourselves. Things will work out like this. And the in-laws on both sides were very supportive of that. And a lot of times they would even press the issue like, don't do it this way, because I tried that. That didn't work. You know what I mean? I know my parents were like that a lot of times when they were either giving me advice on her or talking to her. It's like, make sure he doesn't do this, this, and that. So, vice versa would occur, every so often. Her parents are a little farther away, so that does, particularly pertain to that. They talk to her like every day though. But either way, they're supportive. That's what the main aspect is, and what I'm adamantly suggesting that all you married couples out there, pay attention to that. When your in-laws are supportive, or there's a certain perspective or point of view that they're supportive of, doesn't mean you have to do it. You understand what I'm saying? You're supposed to cleave to your spouse. That's what the word says. But take it into consideration.
Absolutely.
Definitely take it into consideration, because whatever they're telling you for a very good reason. They're not saying that you absolutely have to do it, but you should absolutely acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So.
Well, because then here's the also the issue is when, like you said, when you do have trouble, then what do? The worst thing is marrying into a family that when you guys have an issue, oh, I knew they weren't good for you.
Yeah,
or
that's
all right, well, I know some divorce lawyers, or like, you know what I'm saying?
right.
Like,
How about
go
some
to the
therapy, like
extreme.
some therapists or some, you know.
And it's like, and it like, we can chuckle at it a little bit, but
When you're going through that, it's not funny.
it's not a funny thing. And also, like, it happens.
Yeah.
There
Oh,
are
yeah.
people out there that just totally disregard for whatever reason, and then they find themselves in miserable situations.
Absolutely.
And part of it has to do with the fact that their family never liked their spouse anyway.
Right.
So it really just didn't work for that. So I cannot emphasize enough that marriage is a culture and your in-laws are important.
Right. Now, her cleaving to me, that the thing I want to say about that is that kind of brought something out of me, because it called upon me to do, you know what I mean, to do certain things that at that point it wasn't an obligation, it was more of a privilege, but it was definitely a necessity. So if I have a person that's cleaving to me, that means that I definitely have to provide certain things. And there's a supportive behavior. Like, for example, the hubby backing thing that I always do, that positive reinforcement is not something that I just want to do. Not only do I want to do it, it's a necessity. It's what she needs. You have to know what your spouse needs. For my spouse, I know that she needs a certain level and a certain type of protection. So her cleaving to me brought that out of me, that protective side. Another thing I wanted to add about that was because when my in-laws saw that, they were like, "Oh, okay, so that's what he's like when he goes into protective mode, or when he goes into," you know what I'm saying? Because it was like, it let them see that side where it's like,
It's a grizzly
I don't
bear.
think I really have. Oh gosh,
I
she always holding that. Don't you gonna put a grizzly bear emoji on me?
I am.
She's gonna put a grizzly
I am.
emoji. You silly. Anyways, honey. Anyways, they saw that side, and it was like, you know, it put them much more at ease, because it helped them understand that they don't really have to worry about her, you know, when she's in my company. And it made for a better connection, a better relationship.
Right, because
Same thing
it
with
was
my
kind of
parents.
like,
My mother
oh,
saw her do certain things, and it was like, oh, okay, so she got that. That's great. And then my father tasted her cooking. He was like, "God, you a wife that can cook." You know what I mean? So that, yeah, I'm blowing spot a little bit. I'm gonna get you back
I'm
the bear emoji.
laughing because for two things. It was like, once, you know, my parents really got to know you a little bit more, it was like, oh, it's not attitude. It's just, he's just a protective person. And then when your parents tasted my cooking, it was like, they stayed for a whole 2 extra hours.
It's like, oh, he's not just biased. It really tastes good. She can really like throw that.
They almost got on the road, and they were like, okay, well.
It was hilarious, because they came over our house for dinner. That's what we're referring to. And as they were sitting down, I was like, you know, you guys got a little time or whatever. So they took that food out, and it was so good that they stayed an extra 2 hours after that. And I'm looking at the road. I'm like, it's dark. Don't y'all gotta go? And they're like, yeah, we do. But yeah, so like I was saying, so I ended up driving them home, you know.
Yeah.
But it was a blessing. It was a wonderful thing to see that. And like I said, that in-law interaction it's healthy for your relationship. If anyone else you got going.
Yeah. So I wanted to go over the fruits of the spirit, because this is also a biggie. Because with marriage being a culture, and we're talking about in-laws, it's important to be evenly yoked.
In case you put it up there,
It's going
evenly yoked.
So it's important to be evenly yoked, because there's going to be a lot of things that, even with some cultural differences, when you guys have the same foundation, that's what's going to be the most important.
Right.
And when we're talking about culture, we're not talking about like different nationality, or you came from a different side of the world and, you know, I lived in America my whole life. We're just talking about literally the household. The household is its actual own unique culture.
Or subculture, whichever you want to call
However
it.
you want to phrase it.
Yeah.
So the fact that, and I think that you actually grew up differently in the church than I did, because I've gone to Baptist churches and things like that, but my the main church that my parents brought me to was a non-denominational church.
Yeah, that's correct.
So we did a lot more of like free worship.
Absolutely.
The worship was pretty much almost as long as the sermon, and the sermon was not more than an hour.
Right.
We did a lot of like, just like speaking in tongues and things like that. Whereas like my grandparents, for example, and I'm pretty sure how you grew up more so was like more Baptist. So it's like, yeah, they're all day.
Right.
They got the food ready, and it's
everybody up front wearing pointy shoes, and at some point in the service,
hollering.
They hollering. They going dancing through the shimmy.
Yeah.
Right? Slide across the floor.
Sweating.
Sweating is always involved. It's hot, and and you stay till like 5 p.m.
Especially
on a holiday.
Yeah. So it was just interesting because when we had first gotten married, and you started coming to church with me, I could tell that it was like a very different atmosphere for you.
Absolutely.
And so it's even things like that you want to pay attention to, that you want to study. And if you notice that like your spouse isn't exactly enjoying the same things, or it seems a little more reserved about something, then that's your cue to like really like to bring it up to them, talk to them about it, and really try to come to like some type of middle ground, so to speak, because we were saying before, marriage it's not a compromise, it's a partnership. It's a commitment. You have to have that teamwork. So now I think that you quite enjoy the non-denominational aspect.
Yeah, it was, when it was new to me, a lot of it felt awkward, but I have to say that there was never a time where I didn't find it enjoyable. There were parts of it like that were more familiar, and it was like, oh, okay, that's nice. Then there were other parts that were refreshing because I never experienced. There were also other parts, however, like I said, that were awkward. So those were times where I would just kind of I'd stand there and just be still for a minute, like, okay, let me take in what's going on. But I couldn't say there was ever a time I didn't enjoy it, because I was at a point in my spiritual walk where I just enjoyed being in church. I loved it. So that, for me, was always something that helped me to grow and advance further.
And it was like, he wants to come to church with me.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember there was a time I surprised her. I came up to her church. She didn't expect me to come.
Yeah. We had it was an event. I think it was like I was helping with this church that was opening, and then you came to the event, and I was like, oh my goodness, he showed up.
And that was before we were even engaged. So
I think so he's a keeper. Galatians 5:22. Right. So now we're going to read from the scripture.
Galatians chapter 5, verse 22. But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against these things. So when with reading those things, that's kind of like the law that you want to abide by. Because regardless what is going on, around you, etc., if you have these fruits of the Spirit, you will be able to communicate effectively. Right. So the reason why that's important in this particular segment is because of everything else that we have addressed and discussed. Yeah, that's correct. So we wrap it up.
Yeah, so we're gonna wrap it up. I actually, later down the line, we will get into discussing the fruits of the spirit. That's going to be like its own series, because it's definitely important, and you need that in your life.
It's crucial.
You absolutely do. So really quick, my parents had sent me the name of these books. So you might want to check them out. They've read them and they said they're really good for marriage. 5 Love Languages, His Needs, Her Needs, Kiss Me Like You Mean It, and The Love Dare. So,
all right, well,
that's it.
That concludes our episode for today. Thank you all for watching. God bless. See you next time.
All right, bye.